Our next guest has an extensive career, starting out with TNT's Inside the NBA before working two Olympics, both Atlanta and Nagano, and then transitioning to the Goodwill Games in New York. You can hear him on NBA TV and on NBA.com's Top 10 Highlights. Welcome, Beau Estes, onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Beau.
No, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. Every time I hear one of those intros, one thing really hits me is how old I really am becoming now. I mean, how long I've been doing this. The Atlanta Olympics were 1996, so that's almost 30 years ago. And I've been at Turner since before that. I was working there in college. So, like, it's just, man, it's a long time. But when you look at the landscape of the media, I feel extraordinarily fortunate to still be in this business and working professionally. So, whenever I'm with you guys, that means I'm still working, and that means it's a good thing.
Our tradition on here for first time guests is to ask you, what is your first basketball memory or your favorite basketball memory, whatever way you want to take the question?
Okay, so my very first basketball memory, no joke at all. I grew up when I was really young in Southern California, here in a town called Mission Viejo, and we had this rookie when I was a little kid named Magic Johnson. And I remember that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wasn't going to play in Game 6, and Magic was going to start at center. And Magic won us the championship for the Lakers. I was a Lakers fan back then. I've worked in the NBA so long, I honestly don't care who wins. But Magic won us the championship then. And there was this old cable outlet called On TV, and they did this montage with this song, Do You Believe in Magic? And it just hit me so hard how much I loved basketball. And I had told my parents when I was a little kid, all I want to do in life is be a sportscaster. So it just sort of really brought everything together for me. I want to be a sportscaster, and I want it to be an NBA. And lo and behold, here I am. So it's incredible.
So, Beau, you mentioned your extensive background and experience, and I want to kind of pick your brain in terms of basketball media specifically, because I think it's led the way in terms of the athletes after they have retired, owning their brand and getting into the media space. And I know this is kind of a long-winded question, but since you've been covering the NBA specifically to now in 2024, what kind of trends have you observed in terms of just the basketball media space overall? Do you think it's grown in a positive manner? Do you see anything troublesome, or just your overall observations, just you beginning discovering the NBA to kind of now? Because I think it's changed quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, sure. Make sure I come back to the troubling part because I do see some troubling aspects, but I'll give you just a little detail.
Sure.
When I came into Turner Sports, the guy that was second in charge was a guy named Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson played point guard for the Georgetown Hoyas, won a national championship, ended up playing for the Sacramento Kings, and he ended up running Nike basketball. But Michael Jackson, before that, worked with us at Turner Sports. And I remember Michael was the guy that helped put together the lineup that you know as inside the NBA. Kenny Smith was also in that backcourt at Sacramento. So he brought Kenny Smith in. Kenny Smith became a part of that. He helped to bring Charles Barkley in. Charles Barkley became a part of that. So to me, that was a basketball player who was taking charge in the media and what it looked like back then. That's Michael Jackson. He was the ideal of sort of that sort of brains behind the operation, and brought Kenny in and brought Charles in, and they became the biggest sports TV show ever. It looks a little different now. Guys like LeBron, really smart guy. He has his own shows, and they appear on HBO and stuff like that. So I think LeBron's just really smart on that sort of front. So I think he's done really well. And now you get into guys even like a JJ Redick, who's got his Old Man in the Three podcast, and that's been really successful for him. So I think that's good. And even, maybe not as big a profile, but somebody who's, to me, just as good in media, a guy like Theo Pinson has his own podcast, and he has folks on. He actually makes news on there. And Theo is a really great broadcasting personality. So I think there's a lot of stuff like that. The one thing that concerns me in the media is I wonder how much content is too much content. How much content can we all take in? And I worry about that. Those of us that are fortunate enough to work at a big company like myself, we're shedding jobs. We're shedding jobs left and right and trying to do it in a more streamlined fashion. And that's fine. I mean, because if you can't make a profit the other way, at least you're still doing something. So That's a bit troubling to me. The other thing that's troubling, if it's an athlete that is active, like a Kevin Durant controlling the story, um, you don't have the other side of it, the inquisition side, the side that you're asking a real. People always say hard questions. I think it's just the question that the fan wants to know. If you're asking Draymond Green, if Draymond Green tells his side of it on the podcast, of his troubles earlier in the season, that's of value and that's one thing. But if you're the reporter and you're saying, in that moment, Draymond, what were you thinking? What's going through your head? Is there any sort of part of you that's saying, "Uh-oh"? Some of the questions that the fans want to know. I worry that if the media becomes too much player controlled, then the fans won't get the answers they want out of the players. That's a concern I would
Yeah, that's a great point. And there's been plenty of reports and even interviews we've done on our show about kind of the controlling of the message and image around like Michael Jordan in the 90s, who
have.
Justin and
Sure,
I grew up adoring. Um,
sure.
and it seems like there's maybe like a pendulum that has swung to this player empowerment, player control of the message type of narrative. But I mean, is it simply kind of doctoring the message in another way? And is there potential for that to, eventually swing back in the other direction?
Yeah, I don't know that we'll ever see somebody quite like MJ again, in the fact that he had
Sure.
total control over everybody. He was just, and that's some of that is due to the way the media is, and you hear about the monoculture or whatever. He was just bigger than anybody we have now. He was a bigger star, bigger celebrity. But think about this: MJ could control it to this point. You know how many times he's ever appeared on Inside the NBA? Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. Think about that. It's the biggest basketball show ever, and he doesn't need to appear on it. He doesn't need to appear on it at all. That's how big that guy was. I don't know that we run into that problem as much as just folks saying, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to talk to you. And I'm only going to talk to these folks that are friendly outlets or are people that we own. If it's a publication or service that we own, and we know the reporter's going to be friendly with us, I worry that they would just talk to them. So it's just a concern. I'm not saying we've reached that point, but I would be concerned about us reaching that point. So it's a little bit different. I do some media instruction and stuff like that, and I watch the proliferation of those outlets, and I'm just curious how they're going to handle it. There could be some really great stuff. Honestly, there could be some stuff that we in the media never thought of. Like they could take us behind the scenes and show us, here's what it's like in the morning mentally as we prepare for a game. Look, I just thought of that. I'm a member of the media. They would probably think of something better that we've never thought of. So there's good things that can certainly come out of it, but there are things that are, to me, concerning as well, I guess.
Well, I want to get into, I think, what I discovered of your work, and that is the top 10 highlights that you do and your distinct
Sure.
style and just your thought process of how you voice just the highlights. So can you just take us through just the beginning process to the end, just from your script writing to just how you came up with your style? Because I think it's very distinct and really just a lost art nowadays. Because I think when Matt and I were growing up, we were growing up with sports in our top 10 all the time.
Sure.
Highlights were a huge part of our lives. And now we sound kind of older now, but I miss those days. That's why I love hearing your highlights. I think that's important, and not just seeing a YouTube clip. And this, I mean, having the soundtrack part that's part of the highlight is very important. So if you can just take us through the creative process you go through, I think that'd be very appreciated.
Well, first of all, thanks for saying that. And that's what I grew up with too. Guys like the Sports Center guys, like Craig Kilborn and those folks. I remember very specifically, and my I can still remember my favorite Craig Kilborn call. I mean, that's how much it meant to me back then. So I think that one of the reasons that I still have a job is that the NBA demands that I'm there, or that somebody is there narrating these highlights. They're not wanting this to just be nat sounds without any explanation, without any
Yeah.
statistics. The NBA demands that the product be this good for the fans. So I really appreciate the NBA for doing that. I wouldn't have a job if it weren't for that. But as far as the top 10 goes, um, this is going to sound crazy, guys. I don't have a script. I don't write anything down. There's not a thing that is written down when I do this. I had a reporter in here recently in my, temporary, we live in a temporary apartment here in LA, but, we had her in here and I showed her, it's this, the producer with the NBA puts together the list of plays, the top 10 plays, and they will write down, LeBron James dunk, Steph Curry three, Giannis dunk, and it'll have number 8, number 7, number 6 beside it. And I will just look through it, and whatever sort of pops in my mind is what I'm going to say. And I've done it so long that I can remember sort of the hook for each play, and it's just ad-libbing to the hook, almost like a song or a rap or whatever you want to imagine it to be. It really is just that. I The ideas come from whatever throughout the course of my day. The day that reporter was here, I had heard a song by Jack Johnson called Constellations. And I just liked that word. I kept thinking of that word. And I said something about shot detonations in the constellations or something like that. And it just hit me in the moment. So it's a lot of, either practice for sure. I've done it for years and years and years. So there's that. And then there's, I think my brain's just wired weird, honestly. Like there was a writer for the Kenyan Literary Review who said they think I suffer from something called clanging, which is in my head, everything can rhyme. If I so desire, I can structure it in my mind. And it's not an ability, it's considered a disability and almost like a tick, like a mental tick. But I do think that there's something like that where while I'm hearing a sentence, I know I can end it in a rhyme some other way. And for any other job that I could have landed on in life, it would have been absolutely without value. For this one silly job, it works out wonderfully. And people around the world seem to love it. And honestly, this top 10 is such a thrill for me and such an honor. I do top 10s for the Australian League. They've hired me for the last 7 or 8 years. Teams around the world hire me. There's a wrestling organization that's hired me. There's God knows what else. I mean, there's a gaming company right now that's talking to me about doing stuff for them. I used to have my voice on EA. I don't know what's going on with that now, but all that stuff is all because the NBA demands my voice be out there or somebody's voice be out there, and it's mainly mine now. So I'm just so thankful for that. And I feel so lucky for that because it's given me an opportunity to live a life I didn't think I could live. For years I was the studio host and I would have to go in and put on the makeup and do the dance and everything like that. Now I don't have to do that anymore. I can work remotely, and it just enhances my quality of life in a way that I never dreamed I would get. So I'm very, very, very lucky in that way.
Oh, I think there's an obvious answer to my question, but I want to hear your take on it. Why do you think that across the board we love top 10 highlights so much? I mean, you mentioned like several different mediums there, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I think you're right though. Like, look, SportsCenter does well with their top 10. I think these lists that come out, people love lists and rankings, and who's the second greatest NBA player of all time behind Jordan. People love that sort of thing. And I'm just kidding. But I think people love that sort of thing. But I think, maybe I've really, sometimes people say it's the way I say top 10 at the end, but there's something about it that's like an earworm, almost like a song that you're used to hearing, that you enjoy hearing, that it's a little bit different each time, but it's familiar enough. So I think I've hit on something like that. And I think that people like to debate, right? People love to debate. And you look at any top 10 list we put out there, look at the comments. The producer was stupid. 6 should have been 7, and 7 should be 5, so they should be fired. It's like that sort of crazy commentary out there. I don't know what to do with that, but yeah, that's where they are on that stuff. So I think people just love to debate and argue these lists and everything. And luckily, I've sort of come in above the fray as just the delivery guy for these things. I don't rank a thing. I have nothing to do with the rankings. I get the list, look at the plays, come up with something crazy to say it. That's it. But people really engage with it. I mean, Does that make sense to you guys? Do you think people like that debate?
I think so. How
100%.
about you, Matt?
100%. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think with the I think especially when we were growing up, you would have just a big slate of just different sports that would happen. You would wonder which highlight would be, number one. I think now
Yeah.
everything's just so quick and it's just so instantaneous. At least in terms of the general casual sports populace, I don't know if that's such a huge argument anymore. I think even this past weekend, I mean, you had a UFC going on, you had NBA All Star Weekend, you had a bunch of college sports going on, and I was very curious to see what's going to be the top 10 highlight. But I think for kind of younger fans out there, they didn't even know about the sports in our top 10. They just get all the highlights on TikTok and social media. So I very much think it's a somewhat a lost art in terms of kind of your casual sports viewer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the TikTok angle is something I'm completely unfamiliar with. I'm on Twitter pretty regularly because that just seemed like a good place for basketball conversation, and whatever happens with that is whatever happens with that. But I don't know. I mean, if TikTok's a great place for basketball conversation, then I hope our highlights are out there, and I hope other people are creating content that goes out there. One of the things that I think about in terms of the future for jobs is you owning your own content, not needing a job, not needing somebody to hire you. You're your own gatekeeper. I've had students who are now local broadcasters, and they're going through that process, and then I've got students who are out there just creating their own content, and they're doing just as well. So I just think that's a part of the new market. And so if you're in that new market where it's not even new anymore, but if you're in that market where you're your own content creator, hitting on something like this top 10 that really resonates with people that you can deliver over and over and over again, I think, boy, you could really do well. You could really do well if you could just figure out what it was that people wanted to hear daily or weekly. You'd be doing well.
Have to ask Beau, with us kind of bringing social media into the mix with what Justin was mentioning there with TikTok. How have you seen the coverage change since that really became, Twitter sort of blew up maybe in the early 2010s? I know it came out before
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Um, how have you noticed, the coverage and the conversation around sports, and maybe specifically basketball, or you can take it broader if you like. But what have you noticed with the impact of that?
I think it's tougher for players, honestly. I think
Mm.
because people are so there's no. I thought he played a pretty good game and could have done some of these things better and some of these things worse. It's very harsh, or they're as good as Michael Jordan, sort of thing. Like it's that sort of level of like, holy cow, there's got to be a middle ground. And I think if you're a player, these players aren't just shutting off social media. They're not, quietly going to go home and not pay attention to this. They see what people are saying about them, and it affects them, and you can see that it impacts them. Kevin Durant's a great example about that. He gets mad when people say negative things about him, like a normal human might. So I think that it's hard for the players. I mean, I think there's money to be made in it. Surely you can advertise, you can have a big brand, you can have a big following, you can do all those sorts of things that are positive. You can shed light on issues that you care about. That's also a positive. But I think that the personal toll, um, if I was 21 or 22, what people say about me would bother me a lot more if it was negative. I'm very lucky with how people treat me online. It's bizarre how lucky I am. But if they got really negative, at this age, I don't care. Like it's just a digital thing that says a thing. I don't care. But when you're young, it's meaningful to you. And I worry about those players and how angry they can get, and how much of an issue it can become. So I think it's fair for them to be upset. I really do. I just think that, I would love to think that each team has a good staff in place to help these younger players handle this, the mental side of the game and the mental challenges that can be there. And, like one of the things that I thought I could always do is sort of be a communications professional for players. I wouldn't want to do it for a team, but for players, and how to respond to stuff like that. And but I think it's a tremendous challenge because I think that there's a mental health side of it too that people just, when they're banging out something negative about a player, they don't think how that's going to affect that player. They're just thinking, I'm going to say something that's going to get some attention and I'm going to get a bigger profile. That's it.
100% agree. On the other side of that, too, do you feel like there is a change in media coverage or response in that you have now this like feed, this list of all these opinions? I mean, is there a danger in there and, just going with the mass appeal of what's being said on there, whether the truth is considered or not?
I'll take you to the extreme other side of the story. I used to, like you mentioned, work for Inside the NBA, and I would go out to Doug Collins' house out in Arizona. And Doug Collins, we would prepare research for him. He didn't want any of it. He didn't want a thing. He had notes and notes in a yellow notebook of exactly what he was interested in. And I asked him why. He said, I don't want to be influenced by what anyone else is saying. I want to come up with this all on my own. Now, that's not necessarily the perfect way, but it is a way because, you can learn from other people. We can all grow in this thing. But I think that's interesting because I have a hard time believing that can happen much now. Now, I felt like even last year's MVP debate, for instance, I thought that there was a media rush to take away Nikola Jokic's chances because I think there was a media sense of like, we're going to be the guardians of history here. 3 straight is a huge marker. It's a marker. I don't think MJ got it. I don't think, it's been a long time since anybody's had it. So we don't think Nikola Jokic should be that player that should get 3 straight, which is different from the job, which is I need to see who was the best player this regular season and who was the most valuable player this regular season. That's the job. And I think that narrative grew on social media and grew and grew and grew and grew. And I think that impacted the voting. To me, Joel Embiid had a perfectly fine MVP season. It was a great MVP season, and I wouldn't take anything away from him. So did Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic had an incredible season. So you have to vote for who you really think, and you have to dig in and work. And I worry that social media, impacted that. The other side of social media is, if you're in the press room after the game and you're looking at the comments and you're getting influenced by what people are saying and what people are questioning rather than doing the actual hard reporting in the room, I worry how that impacts stuff. There's pros and cons, but I do see some hazards there.
Beau, I want to shift before we let you go. I can't let you leave out of here without talking about All-Star Weekend, All-Star Saturday night, and then the game itself. What were your overall thoughts, especially after the game? A lot of negative comments, as we talked about just a second ago, social media and on this national television. Are you on the side of totally just scrapping the All-Star game, or do you think there's just more of a easier solution of just solving kind of what we saw yesterday of 200 points for it by the East?
It was rough, man. I'm not going to lie to you. I work, covering the league and everything like that. And it's not what anybody wanted to see. And I think, you don't need to hear me saying this. You saw how Adam Silver delivered the trophy after the game to Giannis's team. The man was clearly disappointed. Everybody tried to push these players into caring more. And the bottom line is if they don't care more, you can't force them to play harder. There's nothing you can do. You can't force them. So if they're not going to play harder, what do you do? I think, look, I hope maybe this social media thing can hit their pride a little bit and they'll care a little bit more. Today, I just went back and looked at a couple minutes of the 1988 All-Star game. I just randomly picked a year in my head and I did one of the scrolls, and I'll stop here. I'm going to watch 2 minutes. And it's a basketball game. It looks like a basketball game. It feels like a basketball game. There are blocked shots. There are fouls. Everything's happening. No buckets are free. Nothing's easy. There's steals. And this is in 2 minutes of action. It's not that anymore. It's just he's taking a couple steps towards the basket, get out of the way, let him do a fancy dunk. Where the rubber meets the road is if fans in the next couple of years are like, it's not worth paying that money to go to the All-Star game because it's a ripoff. They don't try. And then if that impacts the NBA's bottom line, then the salary cap comes down, and then folks' salaries start coming down. And we all know that this media deal is going to be a good one. The next one, that's why, Mark Cuban talked about that's why he is selling the Mavericks and sold the Mavericks, is because he saw the writing on the wall. I think when the players start to realize that, maybe they perform better, but maybe they just don't. As far as All-Star Saturday night goes, I love Sabrina and Steph. I always enjoy the 3-point contest. The dunk contest, Mac McClung did a great job, man. He did. Like, I can't fault, that he's the winner. He was the best dunker out there. The judging, call me. I do this every night.
Right.
This is my job in life. Call me. I can do a better job than those folks, but the judging was a little shaky, and by a little shaky, I mean a lot shaky in the dunk
Agreed.
contest. It should have been Toppin and it should have been McClung, and that should have been it. But we're not that far away from Aaron Gordon and Zach LaVine, which is as good a dunk contest as I've ever seen. And I just rhymed that. I'm sorry. But yeah, that was fantastic. And I would love to see that come back. And those are two guys, like Zach LaVine's borderline all-star some years. Aaron Gordon can be borderline all-star. Those are two very good players. They're not scrubs. Important players in the league. So I think, something like that could happen again. It just goes in cycles to me. I love the 3-point contest. I mean, I absolutely love it. I'd love to see it expanded to 60 players and do it really fast and get through it and to see how many players can shoot. Just something to make it more fun. And All-Star Sunday, I sort of jokingly posted, put it in Eastern Europe, like at Partizan's home stadium. You won't get a half effort there. I mean, those fans would not accept it. I mean, I just think there needs to be a motivation. And maybe it's a player that's super competitive. I thought it might be Anthony Edwards that just couldn't stand to see the level down like this. Jokic didn't seem to care. He seemed to be like, whatever, if this is what they want to do, this is what we'll do. Giannis doesn't seem to care much. LeBron has gone through the eras. He played when it was a little tougher. And you could argue that he's the one that could set the standard. And, people are just sort of sloughing off. It's guys, I'll just be honest. It's a problem. It's a real issue. And I hope we get it solved. I hope there's somebody who's really thinking hard about this. But right now, I don't see a good ending out there unless the players take it upon themselves to have some pride and play harder.
Do you think an All-Star weekend can still be, a success if it goes sort of the way of the Pro Bowl, where we still have the players there to honor them for making an All-Star team, but there's no, formal All-Star game played? I
mean, to me, one of the aspects of All-Star Game is that it's a cultural and corporate event. A lot of people want it's sort of a C and B scene thing. Thank God I don't have to go anymore. But it's sort of a C and B scene thing where, you're just like, people love to go out and who's got new clothes, who's got new shoes. There's, musicians and celebrities there. So it's a whole event. So I think it's important that it continues. And I think, I don't know. I think behind the scenes, the league will communicate in no uncertain terms to the players that it's not just us that are hurt by a diminished All-Star game. It's you, the players, that really take a beating for this. And if you don't get it together, and the other thing is, like, why would you want to let somebody else beat you? I mean, would Kobe have done that? Kobe would never have done that.
No
Never in a million years. So where's the pride? Where's the pride? Forget Kobe. Michael Jordan would have lost his mind. So like you can take it back to people who are just much more competitive, and maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's a larger, issue here. But the one thing I hate seeing is people say it's generational. Like this is a generation that doesn't care. I really worry about saying something like that because these players have worked hard to develop these skills. So they cared at some point. And I think they can care again. I just think it's important that they learn to care in this instance. I think it's really important to honor the tradition that those players that made this success they have very, very possible.
I agree. And it's particularly troubling because you see a lot of these players play in different summer leagues, pro-am, the Drew League,
Yeah,
and they play
they play
hard.
hard.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I don't, and it like you're saying, the All Star game, it's honoring history. I mean, a big part of this weekend was honoring Indiana basketball history, and just to see them just not take it seriously, like you're saying, but I think it's troubling. I think it's a deep concern.
uh, have you guys been to any AAU event in the summer where there's players are playing 8 games in a day, and it seems dangerous, right? It seems like
Yeah.
how many games can you really play? I covered those for a while, and I did like play by play on some of those. Those were much more competitive. Juniors in high school in their 8th game of the day, much more competitive than this. I don't know if is there an injury fear, like, and how much it's going to cost me if I get injured, because the money is so great these days. So maybe there's a risk there that they don't want to take. I don't know, but man, it's bad. It's bad, and it's got to get better because I care about the league. I care about the players. I care about the history, and I care about this not going wrong. And I'm the guy who's out there calling all these highlights, and I'm telling you, it's been better. It's been a lot better in the past, and it's not just like 80s or 90s or any. It was better recently when Kobe was doing it. It was better 10 years ago. So I don't know who took their foot off the gas. I mean, what would be interesting? I didn't even think about this because you never think about this stuff. But I wonder what the 2019 All Star game was like before the pandemic. I wonder.
Mm.
I mean, I don't want to put too much weight on that, but I'm just curious. I'm curious because all the things that you don't think about. I'm just curious. I would want to go back and take a look. Like, where do we see it? What year was it? Did it go from, hey, that's pretty good basketball, to, oh no, this is bad. This is really bad. I don't know when that is.
Now that's interesting because that's kind of when we were still like connected. There was a closer thread between the media and the players too, before a lot of that forced separation happened as well. That's a really interesting theory.
I mean, yeah, if somebody goes back and figures out which year did we fall off, which year was it notable? Was it gradual? Maybe it was gradual, or maybe it was one year where the guys just said, whatever, and then it just became that. For year after year after year after year. I'd be interested, like, Victor Wembanyama seems like a different dude, and cares about stuff like that. I wonder, he's going to be, if he stays healthy, he's going to be the face of the league at some point soon. So I wonder how he carries that flag into an All-Star game and what tone he sets. That'll be interesting to see.
Beau, this has been a fantastic chat. Please let our audience know where they can find you on social media, any other projects you're working on. Let's let our audience know.
Yeah, so I'm at NBA BEAU, NBA Beau on Twitter or whatever the heck it's called now. Yeah, I obviously work for the NBA, doing the highlights every night. I work for the NBL. That's the Australian Basketball League. I'm doing top tens for different events around the country. And then I may have some really exciting news coming out. One about a professorship I may take, and two, about a gaming company that wants me to announce for them. So if you're locked into that social channel, you'll hear about it first there.
Awesome, Beau. Thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Guys, thank you so much for the conversation. I love it, and it was good to have an all-star debrief after what we saw yesterday.
No, completely agreed. Thank you, Beau.